Hey guys, welcome back to the Car Guy Fridays. It's winter time here and we're doing projects in the garage.
So everybody's seen it. The carbon fiber hood that's yellowing, cracking, cloudy, doesn't look as good as it did the day you bought it. Could be some sort of interior panels, or in this case, we're sitting in the 911, you can see here. It came with a whole lot of carbon fiber trim from the factory. This was an option. They're very well known to have lots of cracks after almost 20 years. So what we're going to be doing while Andy is messing with his wing is also taking apart the interior of the 911, sanding it down and doing the same process to bring life back into this interior.
I have an eBay carbon fiber wing here that I bought in the spring. It took about 2 or 3 months for this thing to look like complete trash. Whatever epoxy they used was crap. It's got a lot of micro cracks in it, all over this thing, super rough. Today we're gonna teach you how to sand down a piece of carbon. It could be a wing, it could be carbon on the interior of a Porsche 996. Fix the sun damage on the epoxy and re-epoxy it, make it look like brand new.
We're over here on the driver's side, taking the carbon off here. You can see it looks quite bad. It's got this yellowy green color to it, and it's got a ton of cracks. In order to take the armrest off here, there's a bunch of screws on the bottom, and so I've got a little baby Torx bit, and basically we're just gonna go through each one and grab the little baby screw off of this thing. But yeah, we'll just sit and slowly take each one of these off. As I continue to take apart the Porsche, Andy sands.
Probably almost done with the heavy sanding on this thing. Doesn't look like much right now, but it's way smoother. Gonna hit it with some water so that we can see how many cracks are still left in it. And at that point, probably wet sand it to smooth it out and then throw some epoxy on it.
There are lots of 996 interior disassembly videos, so we won't cover that in detail. Suffice it to say, I've been having a lot of fun removing screws and carefully pulling on 20-year-old brittle plastic. You can see here all the interior panels that I've pulled off. The clouding, green, and cracking is pretty apparent. Most of the time this stuff would actually be black, not army green.
It doesn't look too bad. There's probably a couple spots where I can sand it some more. Yeah, right here in the middle. Right there. Honestly, that looks pretty good. Probably just right in here and right back there.
So we've got the door panel off on the 911 here from the passenger side, and you can see I've been sanding on it. If you look really close, you can still see some little micro cracks in it. As you're sanding down, what you want to do is continue sanding, but you want to do this by hand so that you don't go into the carbon. But continue sanding down until the cracks are almost gone or are gone. And then what we'll eventually do is cover this in new epoxy, and it should, if we get it wet here, the epoxy is going to make it look as if it were wet all the time. So now you can see it's gotten a lot darker. You can still see cracks in this at the moment, which is why we're not done sanding, but we'll keep sanding on this until all of our cracks are gone. So, could be a while.
It's not a fast process at all.
This is not a fast process. Unfortunately, if you try to go fast, what's going to happen is you'll go right through the existing epoxy and then damage the carbon underneath. So you want to get just close enough to where you're going to end up with a very, very thin amount of epoxy because you've went through and gotten rid of all of the cracks. But you'll be incredibly close to the carbon. If you use something that's mechanical, you're going to hit the carbon and then the part's going to be ruined. Lots of fun here. So I've been sanding for a lot longer than I'd care to admit. It's starting to smooth out. There's hardly any cracks in this thing at this point. There's a few of them here and there that I can see. There's actually a few spots where I went down to the carbon, so oops, live and learn. But what we're going to do now is come in and get this thing wet. That'll give it a really gloss, shiny finish, and that'll give us some idea of what this thing will look like once there's a layer of epoxy on it. Let's get it nice and wet. And now
That's what she says.
Oh gosh. And now if we look close here, you can see it's pretty good looking overall. There's maybe just a few spots where I should sand a little more, like right here you can still see a little bit of a crack, but up here you can't. Down at the bottom you can't, and you can also tell that the color is really coming back in this. This looks like carbon fiber as opposed to yellow and foggy carbon fiber. Let's go do a little bit more sanding and then we'll throw some epoxy on this.
It's come time to clean off any fingerprints on the wing, and we're going to take acetone and wipe this down. And this is just going to clean up well.
What this will do is get rid of any oils or anything like that on here. It's a really common trick whenever preparing any sort of surface. So there you go. Nice and acetone clean.
We're basically wiping it down to get any fingerprints off. Acetone smells horrible. There we go. Oh God. I don't understand how all those Vietnamese women work in nail salons were using acetone like all day. Because this stuff is killing brain cells at an alarming rate.
So the next thing we're going to do is set this up. I've got some metal here strategically placed, and I've got some cardboard here as well. So what we're going to do is set this on here. What we don't want are any of the edges touching the cardboard, because what's going to happen is they'll get epoxied onto the cardboard and that'll be horrible for you. When we put the epoxy on here, we do expect a little bit to drip down. Now we're going to come by with the brush and we're going to wipe the edges so we don't have these big drips that dry or anything. But still, some's going to come down and eventually we're going to walk away with this slightly wet on the edges. If the edges are touching the cardboard, what'll happen is it'll get stuck on there. Start mixing our epoxy and then we will get to putting the coat on. So now we're going to start mixing the epoxy. So we've got this eco epoxy. This is a good beginner's epoxy, and it's really easy. A lot of epoxies you'll find have a weird mixed ratio, like a 3:2 or a 5:3 or something like that. This stuff's nice because it's a 1:1, so you just mix equal amounts of both. So you have, with any epoxy, you have a resin, and this stuff's just liquid. It's going to be there, and then you have a hardener. And so when you mix these things together, what's going to happen is they'll actually eventually harden into the epoxy you're used to seeing. So let's go ahead and pour a little bit of this resin here. Yeah, this is a UV protective epoxy. Yeah, now we'll see how well this holds up. It's exactly at 1, so we're just going to mix 2. My understanding is you don't need a whole lot of this, and it goes a long way. If worst comes to worst, we'll mix some more. So we got these little guys here. We're gonna mix this up really good. Tell you what, this stuff is thick.
Yeah, that's what she said.
Look at that. Just going across and covering the part. Now I can already tell that you're gonna be able to see a few of the things that I didn't sand, but we'll see how bad, because in all honesty, I'm having to look for them right now. Yeah, so if, you know, at the end of the day, if I have to just look for them, that's a-okay to me, because that is way better than what it used to look like. Alright, I can also tell that we're going to have way too much epoxy mixed.
I got my wing right there.
Oh, we're going to do the wing next. So that's it. Let's move over to Andy so he can finish his wing and do the same thing.
Thank you, sir.
Got it?
Yep. Alright. So when you were putting it on, you were putting it a little bit thick, right? And then
Yeah,
just...
but not crazy thick. You'll see as it spreads.
Okay. Well, I've got a lot more surface area to do, so I'm just gonna put it pretty thick and then just level it off. Was it this thick when you were putting yours on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Kind of sticky?
Yep, there you go. Just do what I'm doing there.
Alright.
That's working it up.
So we found a neat little trick. Any of the air bubbles that we are experiencing, you put your heat gun on low, and what it does is it just gets rid of that air bubble. Bryan's piece, which is the small interior piece, was nowhere near as bad. On my wing, it's just got so much surface area. There was a lot of little high spots, and this is taking a lot of that away. So we're wet sanding here. It's looking a little bit wavy. Yeah, there's water shooting everywhere. Sorry about that. It's a lot of back and forth, until it looks pretty smooth. We're sanding with 400 grit. And then I'm just gonna move to a 2000 right after this. And then we'll take the polisher out.
So Andy's finished wet sanding, or at least as far as he's willing to go, because it's a lot of work. Now what we're doing is taking some Meguiar's Ultra Cut. This is the 105. That's stronger than the 205 that most people use.
We're holding it upside down because we're almost out.
Yeah, we're holding it upside down because Andy's too cheap to actually buy anymore, so we're getting the bare.
Not the...
So we've already got this on here. You can see I've spread it around a little bit. As you can see, we've got a lot of the interior out. We do have some of it back in as well. Getting that gauge cluster out was quite horrible. But I wanted to show you all why we're doing this. You can see here, this almost has a military green look to it. You can also see all the little cracks here and there. So we'll show you this once we're done and what it looks like. But suffice it to say, this also used to look military green and very cracked, so gonna certainly look a whole lot better. All of the 996s that have interior trim, such as carbon or wood, having running down here along the base of the windshield. Now, everybody's carbon and wood strips and everything else tends to peel up. I actually found a company out there that sells replacement. This doesn't necessarily match the factory carbon, but what it does do is match a whole lot better than nothing there at all except a black strip. And I personally prefer to have that there than the typical recommendation of just get the factory black plastics from any other 911. It certainly does look a whole lot better than it used to look whenever there was nothing here at all. So where have we landed at the end of our journey? It was a whole lot of sanding, a whole lot of polishing, some heartache and some pain, but we have landed in a lot better spot. If you remember before, this used to be a military green and was hazy and foggy. You can now see it actually looks like carbon fiber. If we look here on the center console, you'll see there's a few spots that I messed up. Overall, it looks like carbon fiber, which is a whole lot better. When we look at the driver's door, if you remember, this was all cracking, falling apart. It's also not perfect, but still a lot better than it was. Little green, mostly all carbon. So would I do this again? Well, it's clearly far better looking than it was before, even if it's not perfect everywhere. Now, my alternatives consisted of $10,000 in OEM Porsche plastics, $6,000 in aftermarket vendors, 20-year-old plastics from eBay, or $40 in playing with the hobby. Obviously, I chose the hobby. Hit us up in the comments if you have any questions on the process, and we'll be happy to answer them. And of course, if you've liked this video, don't forget to click the like button, smash that subscribe for more content from Car Guy Fridays. See you next time.